If you've ever heard the name Enron before, you know that my comment a minute ago was incredibly sarcastic because they ended up having ridiculous collapses in their organization, covered in fraud and all these other things, because they focused so much on finding the best of something that they didn't think about the people at all and the character that was coming alongside.
Welcome back to the Culture Base Podcast. I'm Dustin, he's Blake. We're the Culture Base, episode 107. April is already here. I don't know where it came from. I don't understand. I don't understand time. Like, I've given up trying to figure out time.
Yeah.
It's an enigma that I don't really understand.
We'll be a third through the year. Feels like it just started.
Yeah, Q1's over by the time this podcast comes out. So
right.
hope you had a good start.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, we're here to make sure Q2 starts out really well for you. Because today, Blake, we're going to talk about something that we've kind of mentioned here and there on the podcast from time to time throughout the previous 106 episodes. And that is learned skills and behaviors. It's probably one of those things that I hear you say almost, but not almost as much as cognitive dissonance, but it's close. It's definitely sprinkled throughout conversations. But before we get into that, I want to remind people that we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and build a scalable team to help them get to where they're going. So you can find out more about us at theculturebase.com. That's theculturebase.com. We got some free resources there for you to check out. But today we're talking about how not everything about our team members, whether they're on the team or we're looking to hire the team, like not everything is fixed, right? Some things can be developed, but some things are baked in to their Dunna, as we call it in our family because of Zootopia. We don't say DNA, we say Dunna. It's baked into their DNA, right? Baked into their Dunna. That might change how you hire them. Obviously, do you hire them or not? It might change how you coach them. And it obviously will change how you retain them over time. And so what we hope to accomplish in today's episode is that you're not necessarily writing off people too quickly, right? Hey, there's some things that can be learned behaviors here, but also maybe not holding on to people too long just because they're right in a couple other areas, right? And how to be able to identify that stuff. Blake, do you have a story about how you've seen this play out on your team before?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy, especially when you hire, to think that you found gold. Right? Like, oh, this person said all the right things. Like, they're great.
In the rough. I can't believe no one else snatched them up.
Yeah, nobody else saw them. Like, I can't even believe they were available. That was now and then, like,
too good to be true sometimes is. And
then, yeah, exactly. And almost without fail, I will say this. I brought this up to my team recently because we went through some hiring events, and I probably have more stories about how the number one and number two people we hired didn't work out than anything, which is crazy because we thought such high expectations. And what we realized was...
Do you mean like number one, number two in your company, or number one, number two first choice?
In the hiring class.
Oh, like in the hiring class. Because you hire in batches, right? I just want to give context here.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we'll hire in batches. Number one, number two seem great. We're like, oh yeah, without a doubt, we're hiring that person. They tend to be the people who don't make it or end up being subpar. And what I've realized is you've got this odd balance between character and skill, or what you're perceiving their skill could be. Right. So it's like you're almost creating this narrative, this fantasy, or this fiction rather, in your head about what it's going to look like when they join your company. And sometimes we can get too into that. And the amount of times that the number one, number two don't work out is way too many. And then you have them and they tend to be very likable. Okay. Which causes some more issues, is because now all of a sudden the rapport with the team seems really high. But what tends to happen is this is like a superficial thing. Like we had a team member who I was like, oh man, this person's going to kill it. They're going to be next level. They're going to take our company to blah, blah, blah. You know, all the things you say in your head. And then all of a sudden, I started noticing in coaching, like something's off, like something's weird. But I was hearing from our team members, oh no, this person's killing it. They're so awesome. But it was always the same thing. They're always good at this. They're always good at this. It's the same thing over and over and over. And then as soon as it finally was like, hey, this is maybe a big hit to the company, but we need to move on from this person because they're causing cultural issues. They're causing skill issues. We just got to move on. And when you finally do, and everyone's like, oh, thank goodness she did that. And you're like, no, hold on a sec. Rewind. Great at, and they're like, yeah, they are great at that. But that was where
that's where it stopped.
Mom always told me, if you don't have anything nice to say, except maybe that one thing, say that one thing. Right. And so we just started noticing you've got to, man, and especially in hiring, you've got to be so critical and skeptical, which is probably not what you would expect to hear on some cultural podcast. Right. But I'm telling you that if you truly care about tending the garden of your organization, then you should be so hyper focused at, if I plant this one plant in this garden, what is it going to do to the other plants? You should be so meticulous at understanding whether they are the right stuff or not. Mm-hmm. So that kind of takes us to this first point about like character versus skill. You know, we're talking about what is it, what is learned, what is something that you can grow in well, what are the areas that you can't. And I think especially for us, we get this backwards. A lot of times we think, oh man, they seem like they're great. There are definitely some yellow flags, but we'll fix those. Those yellow flags will be green soon. And the problem is those yellow flags, if they're in character, it is really hard to change someone's character. To teach them skills, to help them develop, not as hard. But to teach them character, they've had a lifetime of what has got them to where they are in their character. Which means sometimes it's going to take a lifetime to get out of that and to get out of some of those bad mindsets and stuff. Not impossible. Okay. This is not a like, screw them, they're this, like, don't go at it. But like, I want you to think of skills and character. That character is like stone and skills are like clay. Okay. So clay is something you can mold. Stone takes a lot of chiseling, a lot of focus. It takes an art. If you don't have the art to form stone, don't do it. Okay. It will take a long time. You can mold clay way quicker than you can carve stone, right? It just has so many more issues. And there are a couple stories, honestly, Dustin, that I think Enron, remember that big, great place to work, in the 90s actually set themselves up culturally and their core values. They put out this whole like report called The War for Talent, right? And so you can go look at this thing and it's like, it's good stuff. Like it really, like the idea of what it is really good stuff. And they basically turned this whole idea into like a religion. And it was built around hiring the smartest people in the room, finding the intellectual talent, and then just going at it, right? Like, let's just create the greatest thing that there is. And if you've ever heard the name Enron before, you know that my comment a minute ago was incredibly sarcastic because they ended up having ridiculous collapses in their organization covered in fraud and all these other things because they focused so much on finding the best of something that they didn't think about the people at all and the character that was coming alongside it. And the character that came alongside it toppled the regime of what it is. And then you take something like Southwest, obviously I'm going to take the line in the sand. There was a point in time where Southwest, they just deeply cared about the who and like over even the what. Like they obviously everyone, you got a pilot, you need a good pilot, but you can teach a pilot a route, right? Like once a pilot knows how to fly, telling them where to fly is not that different. I'm saying that with a lot of confidence. I have flown once, but that's not the point at all. But I've never flown commercial flight here. Okay. And so what I would say there is they would listen. Their references they looked at from pilots were about the flight attendants, and they wanted to go talk to any flight attendants that had worked around that pilot to understand, like, what is the character like? Will that pilot care about the person in seat 12C, or do they just care about the thing? Because at the end of the day, pilots can fly, but if you don't have the right one in the right organization, like, you're not going to have that same cultural fit. And so the idea here is we need to find people of character who fit your organization. And skills, yeah, if you've got to find a CPA, they have to be a CPA. Right? Like, you can't be like, this person's a good person, and so we're going to just throw them into this. But I think a lot of times people would rather have, and organizations, absolutely, some of the greatest coaches in history would say this, they would rather someone who is a 7 out of 10, but who is learnable, coachable, and a hungry person and a good person than a 9 out of 10 who had no character.
Yeah. Let's talk about coachability, Blake. I tend to think, when I think about character versus skill and these kind of learned behaviors versus like the Dunna ones, right? I tend to think that coaching is kind of where those two things collide, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have to have somebody who can learn new things, right? They have the ability to learn new things, tangibly, right? They have the right connectors in their brains to be able to cognitively like learn those things. I'm using it now. Yeah. So they have to be able to have that, right? But they also have to have the heart. So they have to have the brain part, but they also have to have the heart part, which is that character piece that you're talking about, and actually being coachable. And I think the most valuable trait in your hire is how much are they willing to grow, right? And so that's where coachability is really at the heart of this intersection of character and skill. We believe that if you're not a coachable person, then you're not going to be a good fit really on any team, right? It's kind of the old dog, new tricks mentality. Like, hey, they're set in their ways. This is how you listen for things like, well, the way we always did it was, things like that. The way it's always been done before, the way I like to do it, things like that, will easily kind of start to go, maybe they're not super coachable. And when we're working with organizations, Blake, and we're really focus on middle management and coachability, because they're the ones that we talked about this before that affect culture the most from a 360-degree perspective. What we're really looking in those moments is, are these people that are on your team already coachable, right? Coachable people on your team are leaders on your team. Period. Don't think like, hey, the leaders on your team have to come with all the answers. No. The leaders on your team have to be the most coachable, right? If I go to Blake in his organization and I say, hey, man, I think this is a blind spot that you're not seeing. And he goes, yeah, no, I saw that. It's not a big deal. That's not very coachable. And even since he's at the top of the org chart. But if he goes, interesting, not sure I see that perspective, tell me more. Coachable. Right? Yeah. If they're interested in hearing more, if they're intrigued.
Yeah, that's good.
A lot of body language will teach coachability, right? If you're ever sitting in a room with somebody and they're usually not thinking about it, but their arms are crossed, like they're immediately closed off to being coaching. Now, as a heavier person, sometimes I like to do this for comfort, right? But I like to give myself a little hug, right? A little bear hug. But at the end of, like, most of the time, what you're seeing in that, or they're not paying attention, or they're looking elsewhere while you're making a really, strong case or a strong point or things like that. Or if you go to repeat back what you heard and they can't repeat it because they're not good listeners, not very coachable, right? So in an interview, we're going to talk about here in a little bit of what to look for in an interview, but I like to ask stories of coachable moments, not go like, hey, tell me about a time when you were super coachable. because that's a leading question, right? The lawyers would call that leading the witness, right? We're not leading the witness to the answer, right? We're not leading the interview to the answer, right? But just say, hey, tell me about a time when someone else came up to you with some advice on how to do your job better. How did that go?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel inside? Really get down into their core, not just what ended up happening on the outside, because maybe they were forced to do it.
Yeah.
Right. But really at their core, like, did you feel empowered in that moment, or did you feel shamed in that moment? Now, that's not entirely on them, but it is their choice to decide how they're going to react in that moment. And so coachability, I think, is the number one core competency that we're looking for in every single interview and every single person on our team.
Yeah, that's good. I think that takes us kind of to the next stage of like having you as the leader being able to have really good skills at a skill gap analysis. Okay. You having the right stuff to be able to identify a skill. And what tends to happen is in skill gap analysis, we judge it before we understand. Okay. Because we'll tend to we look at skill gaps emotionally. We don't analyze them. Someone's underperforming. They're not doing great. Our instinct, wrong person. Okay. Your judgment has probably got you where you are today in business, but your judgment also on, hey, that's the wrong person. That's just a conclusion. That's not a diagnosis. Okay. Nobody is going to be at perfect day one. And it's going to take them time. And we forget the time that it takes to get across a skill gap anyway. And also, even worse, we tend to have zero plan for skill gap analysis. We call them PIPs. We call them growth plans. We call them all these things that are one size fit all. Okay. We tend to also talk about the public school system and how frustrating it is that there are 16 different types of learning styles, but there's one type of teaching style.
Yeah.
Like we talk
standardized
about
test.
Things. Yeah, we have standardized, and everyone talks about it like, yeah, it's not that great, but it's what we got, But you are in a place now that is not true. Like we can create whatever needs to be created in these things. There's a story that like right after Vietnam, the U.S. Army started to notice that they had massive skill gaps. Okay. They were promoting soldiers and leaders from within based off of the idea of served time rather than competency. And so in this process, as they started noticing this, the skill gaps were just widening drastically. And so this one general, General William DePoy, good guy. Sure he was, created this whole like training and doctrine command that came in and developed a whole system that looked at the soldier and looked at true, like what were the big skill gaps that we need to fix. And instead of writing off an entire generation of soldiers, this general went in, figured out all those skill gaps, and then created the whole doctrine of the U.S. Army, right? To the effect that in 1991, okay, so 15, 20 years later, I guess it would be 20 some odd years later, after Vietnam, after they had developed this whole system, when Desert Storm hit, the whole ground phase lasted 100 hours. Like that is a vast difference between Vietnam and Desert Storm. So they closed those skill gaps. They figured out what they needed to, and it was simple. It was a 3-step process. Number 1, what does the role require? Number 2, what does the person currently have? And number 3, what is the gap in the plan to close it? Like that's it. We don't need to make this crazy. We just need to know on an individual basis where someone is. And man, I've been reading this great book by Keith Cunningham called The Road Less Stupid. And he talks about one of the most important things for a leader, for a CEO to do is to know point A and point B, where you want to go is point B, and what is that gap between how do you solve and get to point B? But the most important thing that needs to actually be identified is point A, where you truly are. And a lot of times we don't have patience to know our point A. We don't have honesty to identify the point A. And so we rush through point A and just try to get to B because we want to get to done. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing to want to get to done. But the skill gap, the gap between A and B, in order to bring that close together, has to have realism with it as well. So very important, what the role requires, what the person currently has, being honest, and then the gap in the plan to close it.
Yeah. I'll say too, Blake, to our next point, that we talked about these kind of learned skills, behaviors. I do think behaviors are trainable, but obviously to my last point, it has to be with the right coaching, right? I think that many times we recognize that behavior problems, we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater on those, right? We kind of go like, oh, that's who they are. Nailed it. I'm discernment. I got the gift of discernment. I'm just like, boom, there it is. Right. But sometimes they're actually just untrained behaviors. Right. And so if it's a situation where you can see that this is an instinctual like habit, or is it just ignorance? Right. I think a lot of times that we as leaders, we write off. We talked about at the beginning of the episode, not writing off our team members too much. I'm talking specifically here about people that are already on our team. We write off that's just who they are, right? But have we tried? Yeah. Have we asked questions, right? Great leaders ask more questions and make statements to help us understand, are they actually going to be trainable or not? Because coaching or leading or developing or training behaviors, right, requires participation, not just agreement, right? They can't just go, yep, you're right, and then never actually change, right? When we see that in our relationships outside of work, we go, oh, this person clearly has no desire to change. It's just lip service because there's no fruit to what's happening. There's no actual results to what they seem like they're agreeing. It seems like they're on the same page, but I'm just not seeing, I'm not seeing it over and over again. That is an instinctual behavior issue that's probably not going to last on your team, and you're probably hanging on to them too long. Yeah. But if you confront, and you guide and direct and coach, and the things actually do start to change, that's how you know that their behavior is actually trainable, right? I'm not saying anything like brand new here. It's like if 1 + 1 = 2, then you're doing the right math. If 1 + 1 = 3, then you messed up somewhere, right? And sometimes it's not you that messed up. Sometimes it's one of those number ones in the equation, right? Sometimes it's number one meaning me. Sometimes it's the other one meaning you. In this two-way battlefield, if you will. But I think it's important to understand, like, as you're coaching people on your team through these learned skills and behaviors, is it habitual, and is it an unwillingness, right? Or is it just ignorance? And I think if you can get to the core of that, then you can pump the brakes a little bit on writing people off too quickly.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So what do we look for in an interview? It kind of is like the next step here. I think a lot of times, we're looking for very easy answers in these things. And what I'm about to give is not going to be an easy answer because it's going to require you to kind of do some hard stuff here. Okay. So what are practical ways to assess growth mindset and whether someone's coachable before they join a team? The thing is, you cannot assess growth mindset with yes or no questions. Dustin said this earlier. Like, you can't just be like, you growth minded? And they're like, yeah, sure I am. And then you'd be like, that's good. That's what we're looking for here. Like, that is not, that is lazy. That is weak. You deserve what you're going to get. Okay. So what I would say is character's really hard to identify without deep understanding and seeing people in moments of discomfort. Okay. Discomfort is what truly shows some character. I try not to, I think you can know if someone is like not a good person in moments of discomfort, right? But like someone who is seemingly a good person, I try not to fully buy in until I've seen them in a hard time. And it doesn't mean that they're not a good person. And my assumption or reputation of them doesn't matter. Okay. But for me, it does, because if they're joining my team, I need to know that they're the person that I need to see them as. And so, this is where it gets hard, is that you have to create small moments of discomfort in the interview just to see what they'll do with it. And that means you might need to sit in silence. That is really hard to do. When you ask a question and they're like, oh, I don't know. And then you're just like, oh, no, but I need to help you get to the answer. No, you don't. You do not need to help them get to an answer that is going to satisfy you. That is not the point of the interview. The point of the interview is to know if this person's the right person or not. Okay. And so getting to places of discomfort bring out good stuff. Like, we ask weird questions. You've heard some of our interview questions. We ask people how they eat a bag of Skittles. There's no right answer there, but why is a CEO of a company asking a stupid question like that in an interview? That should be going through their heads, them trying to question things and think about things. And I don't know, like, you need to become just excellent at identifying talent. And it makes me think of General George Marshall. He was like chief of staff of the Army. This guy, no joke, was he was known for the person who picked the best generals, such as Eisenhower, Bradley, Patton, Ridgway. He like hand selected all these people. And as people dove into this, George Marshall, like, how did he do that? He constantly had a book that he was just writing things down about people. He became so studious at the art of a person. And so he said, oh, here's an uncomfortable moment. How did they respond in that uncomfortable moment? Hey, Eisenhower just had a huge loss. How is he responding in this moment? Is he trying to explain away the loss? Or is he just like, we got to figure out what happened? Is he studious to how to get better? So this guy became so meticulous at figuring out that information to make sure they were going to pick someone that would contradict the plan for where they were trying to go. And so obviously he had time. If he had a whole book about this stuff, we don't have that time. And so we have to create small moments. We have to create good interview techniques and questions in which we're asking people to give us stories, right? Don't ask people what the right answer is. Ask them to tell you stories.
That's good.
Because the reality, and I think about this a lot, like, I don't remember who said it, but they said, don't let the facts get in front of the truth. And I think that's what we're trying to understand here is, what is the truth about this person, not the facts of the things they did, right? So you're asking like, hey, tell me about a time your manager gave you feedback and you were like pissed about that feedback. Like, how'd you respond to that? And just see what they say. Like, don't, as they start going, well, they were really mad at me because I didn't put things back where they were supposed to go, but they were just wrong for it. And you're like, well,
yeah,
but like, what did you do? Did you do anything good?
Yeah.
Like, don't do that. Just sit in silence.
Yeah, don't lead them. Yeah.
Yeah. Let them say what they need to so that you can understand, where is their point A? We just talked about this a couple moments ago. Where are they currently and where do you need them to be? And what's the gap? Like, if you can't do a quick self-analysis gap on every person you're interviewing, then you're not doing a good enough job. Okay. Yeah. Even if it's wrong, you at least can do some kind of gap work here. But there are ways to do this, to train some of these deep things later on if you have a good analysis up front. But you got to ask better questions and you got to be able to sit in silence.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Last thing before we wrap up, Blake, I want to talk about celebrating that visible growth. If we've gone through the process of either identifying it in the interview or hiring it or training it with someone who's already on our team, it's important that we celebrate it, because the age-old statement is true, that what's celebrated gets repeated, right? And so we want to celebration reinforces. We see that from the time that you begin to walk all the way to you land a big client, right? You did the hard work. The celebration is that you did the hard work. The celebration is that you actually got the reward, right? Yeah. Hey, I actually got that client. So you in your mind go, oh well, then to get the other clients, I just need to do that again. Right. It's the same thing. Learned behaviors work that way. Is you do a thing, you're either rewarded or punished for it. If you're rewarded for it, you do it more. If you're punished for it, you tend to do it less, unless there's something broken in there, right? So some ways to celebrate, I think, is important for us to end with. Things that we see that work a lot are like a most improved award, whether you do it annually or quarterly. These things are always good. And I think sometimes people think like, oh, isn't that kind of just like a backhanded slight? Like, oh, you did suck, but now you don't suck. I don't think so. I think everybody already feels it on the team. So why not call it out and recognize it as a leader, that you see that change? And that goes a long way. Pay raises, obviously, any kind of like monetary gain like that to reward. Benefit additions. Hey, at this level, you didn't qualify for our 401k, but now that you've worked so hard, we want to offer you that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Promotions or more responsibility. Those things, obviously, hey, we saw you be faithful in the small role. We want to kind of incrementally, increase that responsibility as a reward to the growth that we've seen. Right. And communicate that. Don't just be like, yeah, hey, Bob, you're in charge of this now.
Yeah.
Because that could seem like a punishment. What did I do? Why do I have to be in charge of that? You know what I mean? But if you're like, hey, everybody, I just want to say Bob's put in a lot of work and he's really grown a lot. And I think we've all felt it and we've all seen it. And so because of that, Bob's now in charge of XYZ. Boom. Easy as that. Right. But I want to challenge us as leaders as we close this conversation. When you're training up and you're coaching people and you're building up your team, you need as a leader to put on the goggles or put on the glasses to see how far they've come, not how far they are still from your unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, that's good.
Because so many times leaders go like, if they're not as good as me, then they haven't arrived. You don't see me out here, XYZ. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, listen, leader, no one is going to rise to the same level as you. That's why you're the leader. Hello, right? But you see how far they've come, right? Yeah. We just finished the whole thing on A players, right? If you take a C player to a B player, see how far they've come. Yeah. Sure, they're not an A player yet, but they went up a whole letter grade. Yeah. Like, celebrate that, right? Yeah. We're not celebrating mediocrity. We're celebrating progress and we're celebrating growth.
Yeah. Do you follow rugby at all?
I do not. Okay. Certainly not my repertoire of Saturday sport activities.
For sure. I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, I like football, probably like this. And I did, but I basically was like, wow, guys who play football are nothing compared to these.
Oh yeah, they're crazy
people. But you've heard of the New Zealand All Blacks, like it's the most famous rugby team. Okay, you should. Super great. Great book called Legacy, by the way. But in that book, the All Blacks is the team in New Zealand. They are the most, and this is what kind of is like crazy here, they're the most winningest team in all sports in a franchise. Over 100 years, they're 77% winning.
Dang.
Like, that's unreal.
That's dominant.
And they have a culture built around this idea called better people make better All Blacks. And so this idea was around growth, not result. They knew that results come by growth, but they didn't want the result to get in front of the growth. So when there's a younger player that comes in who is visibly improved in the line out and some defensive read or something like that, leadership always has the responsibility to point it out. Hey, good. And then they say the thing. That was part of the culture. It's not like, hey, John, you're doing good. It's like, John, the way you installed this thing over here, unreal. Haven't seen it done like that before. Very intuitive, works great. Way to go. I would have taken 9 turns to get the 1 turn you did here. That was fantastic. Call it out, make it specific. And the whole idea was they called it leaving the jersey in a better place. And so when you had that jersey, who you were at the very end of it needed to be a better place. And so it was everybody's responsibility for everyone to grow. And they knew that the way that that grew was by watering the plant, if you will, of someone's, you did it. You did awesome. And here's the thing, you did awesome. And so building a culture around that, that'll let you know if the people are the right people. Can they accept it? Can they move with it? And then do they reciprocate that to the next level?
Yeah, do they multiply
7% over 100 years? Like, that is unreal. We think about short dynasties, like the New England Patriots. That's a short dynasty compared to 100 years.
That's insane. Insane. Well, hopefully you can take that and a lot of the things that we talked about today into your organization and start this second quarter off with a bang by identifying those learned skills and behaviors, by growing the people on your team and celebrating them at every chance throughout the way to build the culture that you want. So that's it for this episode. Next episode, we're going to be back 108 with, I love this title, Blake. I was really proud of myself when I wrote this down. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Soft skills are a hard yes.
Whoa.
Meaning we gotta have them.
I like that. That was good.
Gotta have them. I cannot wait to talk to y'all about that next time on the Culture Based Podcast. Have a great week.